Welcome to Wednesday Web Chat. This is Carl Lewis, your host from Vision 33. Today, our guest is one more time our friend from Avalara, Maria Tringali. So with that, I'm going to turn the controls over to Maria.
Yes, thank you. It's good to be here again. I'm thrilled to do a follow-up to our last session and to our podcast, as you mentioned. It's great working with you. I've been working with the SAP B1 community for years, so it's always lovely to chat with the community. So we are going to dive into how we can stay compliant. So last time we talked a little bit about some of the issues that we see, some of the challenges that manufacturers and distributors have. Some are both, some are one, some are the other. And what can make this stuff complicated? So today we're going to talk a little bit more about how the pandemic has affected manufacturers and distributors, some of the updates and tax considerations that we've seen throughout 2021. So some real current information, and then also some best practices. How do we streamline tax compliance given all of these new changes that we talked about? And I'll have some recommendations for best practices, and then we'll leave a little time at the end for questions. Again, my name is Maria, and I've been with Avalara for, I should have said 6+ there, but I just passed my 7th anniversary here. And my work here is almost solely with businesses. I help our sales reps and businesses understand the tax compliance requirements for businesses that don't charge a lot of sales tax. There's a lot of other things going on, as we talked about last time. So let's talk first about COVID-19, the pandemic, the stay-at-home rules that we've all had, and how business has changed. So you probably already know, I might be telling you things that you already know, but you probably know that you've had to make some changes, or you're at least wanting to make some changes. So we used to be able to do a lot of our B2B sales in person. We had our channels kind of all set up. We had a lot of personal handshake, a lot of personal phone calls. And we've realized throughout the pandemic that we need to automate a little bit more, and we need to make doing business with us, with our B2B customers, much easier. So we've been forced to add e-commerce in some way, adding B2C e-commerce, maybe selling aftermarket parts, or bringing the B2B purchases online, making it easier for our B2B customer to actually purchase from us. We've perhaps changed how we go to market. We've perhaps changed our supply chain. We've perhaps added new products and services that we've never sold before. So in the last year and a half, there have been a lot of changes. I don't talk to any business that has not made some significant changes in their go-to-market over the last year. And in some cases, it's just been a boon for their business. And in some cases, businesses have had to pivot, but they have definitely had changes. So we're seeing a lot of that, and there can be differences in tax compliance based on how you're going to market and based on what products and services you're now selling and how you're selling them and who you're selling them to. We're going to talk a little bit about the shifts in manufacturing. So what we're seeing is changes to that model, changes of how we're accommodating new demands and new customers and new products. So I have a lot of businesses producing new things to support the pandemic. Just yesterday, in fact, I talked to a business who has created some COVID test kits, and their market is specifically the religious market, specifically for religious organizations to help them get back in the business of having people in the room. So they're providing these test kits that they can provide to their members and then send them back and have them tested and results back in a very, very short order, same day. So it's a really unique business that no one ever would have thought of before. And they're expecting to go out to 34,000 churches just this week and promote this product. So there's a lot going on out there that's really unique, and they need to worry about how is this going to affect us compliance-wise, and how are we going to automate this? Our staff doesn't have the expertise to work with all of this new requirements in new states. What does a religious organization exemption certificate look like? We don't know. We've traditionally sold in the healthcare business. So it's changing how they're going to market, and we need to think about the tax compliance, whether that affects us or not, with all these changes that we're making. So some of the things that we've seen, so in B2B sales, we're seeing that 70 to 80% of our B2B decision makers prefer remote human interactions or digital self-service. This goes back to what I was saying before. We had traditionally gone to market in a lot of ways in a very person-to-person way, but our buyers, our customers, really want a more automated way to doing business. We think it's personal, it's a personal touch, wait for our salesperson to come around. But the fact is, our buyers really want a more automated experience. And that relates to, of course, online purchases and better ways of signing up and submitting the paperwork that is required to do business, being vetted as a proper vendor, or submitting my exemption certificate before I make a purchase, or whatever it is that your business requires. So you, manufacturers and distributors, must move more of your business online and make it easier for your customers to purchase from you. Otherwise, we risk losing business and we risk them going to our competitor. And on the B2C side, we are seeing so many distributors and manufacturers avoid the middleman, at least in some way, and are going direct to consumer. They might be starting an Amazon store. They might be adding a website to sell certain products at the same price that their partners do. They're adding all types of e-commerce channels, different websites for different products, and offering a more seamless experience and a better direct to the end consumer experience, which of course is increasing revenue. So I'm talking to businesses that are doing both of these things every single day. This is what I do all day. I probably talk to 3 to 5 businesses a day, all going through these changes and trying to figure out how to minimize the effect on their staff of tax compliance, as well as make sure that they're getting it right. We're stepping into places we've never been before. How do we make sure we stay compliant and the states won't come after us, or we don't end up with owing people money unknowingly, and that we're collecting the right amount from our customers? So we talk about this a lot with businesses. So let's talk a little bit about some really current stuff. What are we seeing in 2021? What updates, what tax changes have been made? So we work with our partners and we have some interesting numbers. So we can see that that the mid-year manufacturing update, so the manufacturing PMI is what we consider a 62.1 point, which is actually an indicator of really strong economic growth for manufacturers and distributors. Maybe I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but I can just tell you industry-wide, it's definitely on the uptake. Manufacturers are doing very, very well. They also feel very good about business. They're feeling very confident that they will do better in the second half of 2021 than they did in the first half of 2021. So we've got some real positive numbers. We've got positive results, and we've got positive feeling out there. So that's really, really good for the business, and good indicator that good business will continue, which also means we have to continue to monitor our compliance responsibilities as well. So what we're seeing is our wholesale distribution is expected to just continue on this upward trend. We will see increased competition. We'll see new disruptors. We'll see people doing business better, stronger, faster, in really creative and unique ways, and trying to pass up the competition really quickly. We're also seeing big trends in global. People are selling more and more globally. One of the reps I work with quite often specializes in our global products, and she is so busy all day answering questions from businesses and from other internal folks at Avalara about how do we understand what our cross-border sales tax responsibilities are. How do we understand VAT? Do we need to register? What are the fees for shipping something overseas? How do we calculate those? How do we know what we're selling is taxed? How do we know how what we're selling is taxed in these new markets? So a lot of questions about global. And again, tax compliance shouldn't keep you from going into these markets. We're also seeing, social changes and regulatory requirements. States are constantly changing. We've had a couple of states change their thresholds. We've had a couple of states add on to the economic threshold bandwagon, Florida and Missouri. So we're seeing some really current relevant changes out there in your world as well as in the tax compliance world. So it's really imperative that you as a business keep up to date with these, keep up with the laws, work with a partner that knows what's going on, and move to automation so you have something built in to make sure that you are up to date with the changes and constantly monitoring your business and making sure you're staying compliant. So if you're one of those businesses that has moved business online, whether it's B2C or B2B, what do you have to think about from a tax compliance standpoint? So the first thing you need to think about, as always, and I think we talked about this last time, are the new Nexus laws. Most of the states have now implemented economic nexus laws. So if you have been selling in a region, just selling to your local businesses or a certain amount of states, but now going online has really beefed up your ability to sell things into other states, sell them across state lines, ship them farther and farther away. Is that practice going to trigger Nexus in new states? So now more than ever, you need to make sure you are monitoring your exposure, and are we hitting those economic nexus thresholds in other states unknowingly, and do we need to register? The other thing you need to think about is what percentage of my business is to tax exempt sellers across state lines, because a lot of states do take into account tax exempt sales in those nexus thresholds. So you have to be aware of what each state requires and where my liabilities are. Just because I'm selling exempt doesn't exempt me from registering. Many states still want you to report, even though you may not owe them something. So it does open up a little bit of a more responsibility on your part to understand those nexus laws on a state by state basis. We also need to make sure we're collecting our exemption certificates properly. We're making it easy for our customers to submit them. We are digitizing them and not storing them locally. And we know what we're looking at, and we're not putting the burden on our staff to try to know what certificates, like in my example, what the religious organization certificate looks like in Missouri. They have no idea. We need to automate this stuff. We need to worry about the taxability if we've never charged tax before. And of course, don't forget, we need to worry about customer experience. We've got to make this experience of doing business with us easier. So a little bit about the economic nexus thresholds. You probably are aware of this, but if you're not, I do encourage you to work with an accounting partner that has a SALT practice or a company like Avalara to understand your nexus thresholds. But in a nutshell, economic nexus has been implemented in almost every state, and the thresholds where they require you to register differ greatly from state to state. So again, to understand these fully, you really need to work with a partner and do ongoing monitoring of your thresholds in those states. Marketplace laws. If you've moved online to marketplace, you need to be aware of the new marketplace laws as well and how those might affect your sales tax compliance. Again, and that's selling online, adding an Amazon shop, an eBay store, Etsy, whatever third-party sellers you're working with in the marketplace, their marketplace laws can affect your business as well. We need to make sure we're being compliant there. And I think I already mentioned this, but just because your sales are exempt doesn't mean you don't have to register. Most states still require you to register and still report in. And don't omit this part, because if you don't register and you don't remit sales tax, you don't report into them, and you can't prove why you didn't charge tax on all those orders, you can't say, oh, it's just because they're churches. You'll be liable for all the sales tax you didn't collect. So you are much better off with the very small pain of registering and reporting in at the end of the year than you are not registering and taking the risk of them auditing you and you having not registered and then owing all the tax that you didn't collect. So be careful. You definitely need to register, and these are laws. States have passed laws. They're not just recommendations. So back to the challenge of our staff collecting these certificates. There's a lot of things we need to look at. There's what is that certificate? There's the tax jurisdictional assignment. How do we know what the tax is? Sales tax is not related to zip codes. You can see in my example here, we need to do a rooftop, an actual location calculation of a tax rate. It can be very, very different from zip codes, which are created for the US mail. There's product taxability. How are my services or installation taxed perhaps differently than my tangible property? You need to understand tax holidays. So you need to understand a lot when you go online. So the basics are know where you have to collect tax, register, calculate properly, and continue to monitor your exposure and remit sales tax or at least reporting to the authorities. So I'm going to go in really briefly to consumer use tax. So those of you who do manufacturing or do things where you go on site and install things, or you have centralized purchasing and locations, you know kind of what a pain consumer use tax can be. I always talk about it. The reason why it's difficult is because it's very subjective. It's a tax that's owed by a buyer when the tax charged by the seller doesn't address the full liability. And that could mean you either purchase exempt, you use an exemption certificate because you're going to sell most of what's on that in that purchase invoice, but you use some of those things in your business. Or you could purchase them all at corporate headquarters, but send them out to a different location. So where you're using them, you actually owe the use tax to that state. Or it could be that you've changed liability, or it could be for various things. You take cabinets out of inventory, and when you go to install them, it's considered use tax because it's becoming real property. So there are a lot of interesting things going on with use tax, and management is difficult because, again, it's very subjective. So automation can really help you, although you still have to intervene. Automation can really help you understand the laws better and do a better job of managing that consumer use tax if that applies to your business. So in our last few minutes, let's talk a little bit about some best practices. So one of them is intelligent exemption certificate management. I'm, of course, showing you Avalara Cert Capture here because it's what we offer. It is a web-based platform that allows you to collect, manage, track, store, report on, and collaborate your exemption certificates. We can no longer use document management for managing their certificates. There's way too many reasons and way too many states in our business. You can't just collect something someone submits to you and stick it in a drawer or a filing cabinet. You have to have intelligent compliance management platform for this. Document management is literally storing an image. It's not any better than scanning something into a shared drive or putting pieces of paper in a file drawer in a cabinet. Document management does not help. You've got to have something that serves up the right certificate to your customer, improves that customer experience, allows for collaboration, allows you to renew these things and stay up to date, as well as validate them at the time of sale, because that's what the auditor is going to look like. Look for. I want to see certificates for sales on these dates. Consumer use tax that we just talked about, you want to automate. If you have that type of use tax that I described, or you have some complexity, if you have to allocate use tax resources, expenses to different cost centers, to different locations, to installation job sites or big projects, you need a better resource to automate, to calculate your under/over, to assess use tax after the fact, after the purchase. You need tools at your fingertips to get this right. And I will tell you, having done this for 7 years, people that I work with that automate their use tax process end up saving the company money, often millions of dollars, because we've been either estimating incorrectly or we've been paying the wrong sales tax rate. We've been buying purchases, buying our things at our home office and paying the local sales tax rate, but we're using them out in the country where quite often the sales tax rates are less. So use a tool that's going to help you get this right and be way more accurate. I guarantee you it will save your company money using a consumer use tax tool like Avalara's. And then something you probably haven't heard of is Avalara acquired TTR last year. So we now have a tax research tool at your fingertips, part of our portfolio. And what I love about this is it allows you to understand how your products and services are taxed right at your fingertips. You can look up, well, how is installation taxed? If you're a business that does big bids and big quotes for your projects and you're doing RFPs, you're in a competitive environment, you need to understand when you do an RFP or a big proposal, how are things taxed? I ask people this every day. How do you know how installation is taxed, or your services or your products? How, or your industry, how do you know how these things are taxed? What are the drop shipping rules? I'm a drop shipper. What are the drop shipping rules? Which states take a multi-state certificate for drop shipping? There is a tax research tool now that I call basically Wikipedia and Google for tax compliance. You can look anything up in this tool and get a yes or no answer. Have a tax research tool at your fingertips. Understand your business before you start calculating tax and just taking guesses. Understand your business and how things are taxed and how the laws apply to you. So this platform also allows you to ask questions. So we have these researchers that have done all this research. They've read the laws. They've interpreted the laws from that state. They've provided you with yes or no answers. And if you still don't know the answer to the question or you still can't figure it out, our platform, our researchers allow you unlimited questions. Ask us a question as much as you can.
Maria, you alluded to it, but the fact is that Avalara has a great add-on product for our SAP Business One customers who are, struggling with tax. It's just too much of a burden from a reporting perspective, or calculating it, completely accurately in real-time sales. All of that is part of what the product does, and we have many, many customers today at Vision 33 that are served really, really well by it. So if any of our listeners are having those kind of problems, I encourage them to reach out to their representatives at Vision 33 and inquire about Avalara and see exactly what it could do for their business.
I just want to give you kind of a 30-second visual of what that is. So we integrate with your platform, and essentially we replace that sales tax field that you have now with an API call. And so every time you create a quote or an order, your platform makes a tax determination call out to Avalara. And then what we do is we validate the address. Where is that thing going? Remember, I was talking about rooftop accuracy. We look to see if you have a nexus in that state, meaning do we need to do something? Do we need to either check for a certificate or calculate tax? If the answer is yes, the very next thing we do is we check for an exemption certificate, and that's where my certificate platform comes in. So if that customer is not taxable, if they have an active certificate on file, we're not going to charge tax on that order. We're going to return $0 tax. But if that customer is taxable for whatever reason, then we're going to return the accurate amount of sales tax to your invoice. So that's what the customer sees, and that ends up in your GL. And then because all of your transactions are flowing through to us, then we have all of your transactional data in our system, and that's what enables us to complete your returns. So it's an end-to-end solution that is really just starts with that plugin with B1. And ask anybody who's using Avalara, they love it. It takes about 20 steps out of your world. And I think I mentioned this last time. There's typically about 6 or 7 people in an organization that are probably touching all that process that I just mentioned. So it's really simplifying and streamlining tax compliance for your organization and taking out the guesswork. And we have many, many SAP V1 users using this platform and loving it. So thanks for putting in the little plug for us.